Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special Friday social live. We're streaming live to both Facebook and YouTube. Welcome. I'm really happy to be here. This is a follow-up to last week where I did basically what became, honestly, a 3-hour dive into Ukraine and everything that's happening in Ukraine. So there was so much to digest. I knew there would be a ton of questions and things that you would want to discuss. And I think that sometimes, honestly, my best in the flow, crazy guidance as an intuitive comes from just being asked questions and then me just answering on the fly, or I have some questions prepared and answering those questions. So this is a live Q&A. Now, listen, you might be like, live Q&A, whatever, no, stick around, because this is how the law of synchronicity works. You're going to hear something, I absolutely guarantee you, through this live that's going to speak to some area of your life you have been praying on. Now, obviously, we are funneled into Ukraine, and I will say for tonight, all questions do need to pertain to Ukraine and or just everything in the world connected to the Ukraine, that we're sorting out in our countries, in our personal lives, in our empathic systems. So all questions have to somehow emanate from this war, this really awful event. So another time I'll do a live Q&A where it'll be a free-for-all. You can ask whatever you want, or maybe connect it to another subject. But tonight is specifically about the Ukraine. Now, if you did not catch last week, depending on what platform you're on, whether that's YouTube or Facebook, there's a link in the description for this live that goes back to last week's 3-hour marathon. So, you could listen to it while you're hanging out, cleaning your house, organizing your office, and maybe really turn off the news for a minute and just go in with what we covered, last week. And certainly, I will tell you, it ends with a very, very powerful prayer. So make sure that you're not distracted or multitasking when that comes around. But I think it'll speak to you if you did miss it. I would just encourage you to follow the link in the description, take you back to YouTube if the link is on YouTube or Facebook, depending on which platform. It's platform specific, but and you can follow me cross-platform, whether you want to follow me on my Facebook public page or my YouTube channel. You can go ahead and subscribe and ding whatever bells you got to ding there to get notified when new videos are posted, etc. As I always say, the best way to stay in the loop is to get on my newsletter on ohio.com, completely free. You can unsubscribe at any time if you're not feeling it. So we're going to dive in. So let me tell you a little bit about how this is going to go. And just once again, to reiterate, like I did last week, a bit of boundaries. I'm not one that tolerates riffraff on social media. I think that, especially all of us in the work we do on ourselves spiritually, should hold ourselves to a certain integrity of being kind and not just writing things underneath someone's YouTube videos or Facebook posts that aren't thoughtful or kind. I'm always open to critique. I'm certainly never beyond reproach. And I'm always open to questions if you're not sure about something. But I'm not at all open to name calling or any of that sort of stuff that you do see happen a lot of the times on social media. I just block you off the platforms. So if that's something you want to have done, then do you. But I just want to say this is a place where we cultivate kindness, open-heartedness, wholeheartedness, as Brene Brown says, and just connection with each other and ask big questions without making anyone right or wrong. Let's live in the questions together. I think if we did that as a culture, society, and certainly as nations, man, imagine the different kind of world we'd have if we lived in questions together instead of throwing answers at each other all the time as if that's the last word. That said, what I offer tonight is not the last word. It's just insights for now. Intuition and intuitive insights often work that way. I always consider it like kind of backpack guidance. Like if you were going on, the PCT trail on the West Coast, Pacific Coast Trail, where you're, going on this big journey, you can't carry everything with you. You have to stop at stops and refill your backpack. Well, think of intuition as the same way. Intuitive guidance most of the time, or answers to prayers or whatever in this lane, tends to work that way. It kind of comes in right when you need it, and it's relevant and true for then. It may not be true in 2 months. It may not be true tomorrow, but it's true for now. So when we get into the realm of Q&A, which I love, because as an intuitive, my intuition's triggered by questions. Clients would ask me a question when I was doing readings, and then I would immediately start to download the answer. And so this for me is like kind of doing readings. It's sort of fun. I get to kind of be with you in the question and not always completely sure what the answer is going to be myself until I kind of plug in and get going. So because we're live, say, hey, ask questions now. I'll take breaks. Ask questions then, because here's what happens. Your comments go so quick that I can't see the questions sometimes, and they just zoom past. So when we get to the question section, and I have some questions people wrote in. I'm going to get to some of those first to warm you up, and it'll maybe answer a question for you that you have or inspire a question that you might have. But when we get to the question section, if you just hang tight, and then when I'm ready, I'm like, hey, listen, let's see those questions. Okay, and then I'm going to say stop with the questions. We got a few. And I just want to stay with this one. If we can just kind of keep it tight on the chat, that might be good too. As best we can. I know you're going to have lots of things you want to keep saying. And the chat is there for interaction, but I just want to try to be able to see the questions as they fly past the comments that are coming both from YouTube and Facebook. So the way you submit the question is just right in the section where you'd comment, because I see those. I see them all right now. So let me say hi to some of you saying that. Having said that, Deborah Gibbs on YouTube, what's up? I see Universal Healing Arts. Well, I love the title. I love what you're representing, what you're putting down in the world. Linda Vaselli, hello on Facebook. We've got Georgia Vale on Facebook, and Louise Martin on Facebook. Hey, Louise, what's up? She's one of my members. Robin Voigt Simmons, what's going on? Good to see you all. Thank you for coming. Really, truly, thank you for coming. Q&As, I will say, I think they're so underrated. I've done Q&As where I'm like, God, that should just be a course itself. The whole Q&A session could be a course. So I'm sure we're going to get into, hey, Peggy Vogt, guten Nacht. Margaret Flynn, all right. Julie Farron on YouTube, nice to see you. Hillary Malley, my neighbor, on Facebook. Well, great to have you all. So I'm keeping it real with my ginger brew tonight. I don't know if you all know, but this is my thing. And it's made from scratch. Just kidding. But it is a special formula, which maybe someday I'll share with you. My members know what it is. I literally get emails. What's in your ginger brew? What's in your ginger brew? So I want you to reflect for now while I sip some of this for a second on last week. And let's also include anything that you have a question regarding the Ukraine on. Anything that you have, where like, I just wish I understood this piece of it better from a spiritual point of view, or psychological point of view, intuitive point of view, or where is this karma headed? Like, what's in the field? How can we feel that out? Can it shift? I mean, I'm asking questions already. All right, so get your cues ready. Hey, Paul Seagraves, good to see you. Okay, so let's get focused. So I did post, I think it was just yesterday, and also another post in some of my groups, a place where you could submit questions in advance. So we do have some that were submitted in advance. I'm going to put some of them on the screen here shortly. And then I can take your questions. And what I love about the live stream is I can actually put them on the screen, bring more engagement for all of us, because, when you're trying to understand a question, and by the way, a little tip here, keep the questions to like 2 or 3 sentences, because if it takes me 10 minutes to read your question, everyone's going to get bored, including me. And we just get, what do you got? What are you trying to ask? We do have some long questions that got written in advance. Just keep that in mind for the next Q&A. I don't have time to read 3 paragraphs. So the 3 paragraph questions will not be asked. All right. So let's start with, I'm going to put this on the screen, actually. These are great questions, by the way. And these came through into Facebook. I think all these came to Facebook. Yes, these are all Facebook. So I'm going to start going through them, and I'll put them up, and I'll come back to camera. And we'll go in order a little bit, and then I'm going to take them from you, my live people, and add some also that were written in. So I'll be answering some of those as well. But I want to go with some live ones as well. But let's kick it off just so you can get a flavor of some of the questions that you might want to ask. Okay, so here we go. This is just a list that I compiled right before going live of questions that were asked. So Margaret McElrath asks, a few years ago, I read a book by Dr. Brian Weiss, who shared a client's future life memory. So in other words, what she's asking about here is Brian Weiss proposes that this client had a future memory of a lifetime not lived yet. I'll discuss that in a second. That life noted that there were places on Earth that were contaminated following a nuclear war. Ukraine certainly holds the potential for a nuclear crisis. Can current light efforts influence that outcome, or is that a foregone conclusion? Light meaning prayer, all of us coming together as we do here and engaging in shadow work, which is light work really. And if all events are happening simultaneously, can we alter that future life? Thanks always for your insights. Great question. So I'm going to take it off the screen. You know, there's a lot to unpack here. So I have to first start with my perspective on Dr. Brian Weiss's work, and I actually know him personally. We've been at many. We used to do conferences together all the time. From 2009 to about 2012. Haven't seen him for some time. Wonderful man. Very interesting body of work. Here's the thing that I've learned about let's just say hypnotic regressions, past life regressions. And in this case, it sounds like future life progression. The human psyche is a fascinating creature and is capable of generating so much imagery. Now, the thing is, we have to remember that once we're out of these bodies, if you will, and therefore psyches, we don't perceive reality in the same way, because reality is very different without a body. I mean, duh. So in my experience, and I can only speak from my experience and my own sensibility and intuitive sense about things. And it's never to make anyone wrong or make anything right. It's just what I know to be true for now, based on those things. I've found oftentimes that past life regression, and I had conversations with Dr. Brian Weiss at dinner many times about this, that he could never fully answer. But my sense through readings was that when you do past life regression, you have to be very aware, technically, I'm a technician, but technically aware, and this is what I would look at in readings, from intuitive readings with people, of what you're actually getting in the imagery. So someone, for example, in a past life regression could actually possibly be speaking to imagery that's emanating out of their own human cell tissue through the DNA, the psychic DNA of their family line. It may actually have nothing to do with their own soul's past life at all. They could, in fact, be experiencing imagery that's relative to the body and cellular memory they're in. And I don't know of any past life regressionists that differentiate with technical clarity in regression therapies the difference. And by the way, maybe that doesn't really matter, because either way, something's coming forward to heal. Either way, whether it's from the body and sort of a lineage of psychic DNA and memory from the cell tissue, or whether that's genuinely from a past life, the soul's experience. Because here's the thing, these are barometer checks that make for clear guidance around this very murky area of the human psyche. One, all of us, without exception, have had horrific deaths in past lives. All of us. So you always do hear about how these people come in with past life issues, and then once they have the regression, like the kink out of their neck is gone or the health issue they had was gone. Okay. But we'd all have issues because we all died some gruesome death somewhere down the line. Why aren't we all walking around with kinks in our neck and different health issues from past lives? Well, we're not. One, I think that some of the people that have contracts to actually manifest that phenomena have contracts to manifest that phenomena simply to make us aware of past lives. That's it. That's all there is there for me. There's past lives. Oh, wow. Interesting. You don't believe it? Well, watch this case study of this person who had a regression to experience, I don't know, a hanging, and they have asthma. And once they had their regression for the hanging, now they don't have asthma. The biosymbol from the past life somatizes into asthma and clears once the regression's done. I absolutely believe in that. But I don't think it's for anything other than, hey, there's past lives, people. While you're in this, forgetfulness that's necessary for this life, I just want to remind you, says Spirit. That's all I think that's good for. I really mean it. Because we would all, having died some horrible way, have something going on, and we don't. So this is where these sort of shrewd metrics clear stuff up for me. And that's, once again, not to make anyone wrong. I love Dr. Brian Weiss's work, but we evolve into new perspective over time. And one of the beauties of the work I got into, really fell into, got called to, is that it gave me a way to see other reasons why certain things were going on that someone else maybe took at another level of value. Because I'm looking at the core reason why you're born. I'm looking at how your psyche works technically. I'm looking at the dynamics of the unconscious, the shadow and subconscious mind, and human ego, and the role of the human mind shrewdly, like shrewd as F. So when we look at phenomena, we always want to be able to question the paradigm itself that the phenomena is coming through. Now, let's look at future life memory. I can't say I ever saw in readings anything about another lifetime for someone, but I wasn't reading for that anyway. So it wasn't like I'm like, well, how's this going to go to the next lifetime? I actually literally never asked that question in a reading because this lifetime to me is all that mattered. And usually to my client, that's all that mattered. Now, what I can say about this sort of intuitively and just from soul contracts, after reading thousands of them, is that there are things in the future. There's karmic grids here that have momentum in them that sometimes like a couple hundred years in the making. That momentum is that strong. And it will find future tipping points. And there does come a time where that karma is so strong, there's nothing for it. It's going to tip, meaning an event will happen. It's just how it is. The grid, we're not awakened enough yet as co-creators here in mass to shift karmic momentum like that. I think there's a possibility we can, maybe in humanity's evolution, much further down the line. That's not where we are right now. Keep in mind, you and I, we speak archetype, we speak intuition, we speak empathic senses, we speak energy senses, we speak karma. But most people on this planet, those do not exist in their vocabulary at all. Those words do not exist in their vocabulary at all. We think they do because that's our bubbled world. But I can tell you, when you start to look at the masses of religious followings that religions have compared to us, come on, we're dwarfed. So that's where you start to look at the baseline consciousness of humanity. There's someone in this life that will kill you for $5, no problem. And there's someone else in this life that will save your life at the risk of their own. No problem. These extremes exist here. And then, of course, there's gradients, right? All the way through the middle. But when you look at mass consciousness, as you watch Ukraine right now, I don't know if this has occurred to you, but it certainly does to me every night. The thought that goes through my mind is, how can we as a humanity still be doing this shit? We're still killing each other in invasive, non-provoked war. Wow. That's where we are. Or part of us anyway. Really. Have we not learned? No. Some of us haven't. So do little teaching exercise, this is what's fun about Q&A. I say stuff that I don't just teach in a class because it's sort of in a different part of my library than a focused course. But future life memory, does it exist? Possibly. I think that's very possible. But I also feel like I'm not sure. Here's another little book in my library I'll pull down just now. We're not, and I'm not as an intuitive, by the way. And you do hear this, because if any intuitive or psychic or whomever ever says this, you should know they're full of shit right away. I am not, and was not in readings, able to get all information just because I wanted to get it or pull it from, let's say, the energy files of somebody. I'm not able to do that. I can get a lot. But there is a guardian, let's say, of information that says you can't know that. It interferes with someone's lesson, your lesson. You can't know that. You don't have the wisdom to carry that knowing in relationship to guiding that person. You're not mature enough yet. So when I was an early intuitive, I would feel like I was pressured, because people were paying me, to get anything and everything they asked for. And I spent a good 4 to 5 years in anguish until I realized I'm not supposed to know everything. I'm supposed to know what, and can know like that, what I have the maturity to handle with a client, convey, and also that best serves their co-creative journey at this time in their life. That's the information I get. Now that I'm more mature and discerning, and as I got more mature and discerning in readings, there were things I could get more of, and I wouldn't tell the client, because that wasn't for me to do. It was for me to organize better the current information I had so I could deliver it knowing that this was coming down the line. And that happened all the time. So if you have a loved one that's going to die and I see that, I'm not telling you that. If it's not something I think that's helpful, useful, and empowers where you are right now. That's fate and destiny. That event will come. You will go through the loss, as we all will. But today, you don't need to know that. So when you do pray, or when you try to read your life with oracles or whatever you might do, you may not be, the first question to ask is, what can I even know? Guide me to what I can know. So when we look at this future life memory from this question, I have doubts about whether one would be permitted to know that. And the human psyche is a cultural, I'm going to say this actually. Ooh, yeah. It's a culturally patterned vehicle of consciousness, which means that if we only stay at the level of humans, the perceptual bandwidth of the human psyche, you're going to see through your fear or cultural biases or patterning or family trauma, because that's where it is. Now, there's a question coming up later about being a mystic. Now, when you get mystical, that's when you jump out. Now, most regressionists that I've seen don't understand that, once again, you could be in the hard drive of the human psyche working with imagery, because in a way, that's what's useful. This is we want the images we associate with this life to communicate to us. And you have to be very, I just think you have to be so technically sharp in these areas of things like future life memory, past lives, to really, really, as you go in surgically almost, like, okay, where are we in time? And where are we in your consciousness? Am I just in your human psyche? Or did we hop up to the soul? How do I know? What are the markers of a soul speaking versus the human psyche? Hypnosis does not just take you to the soul, by the way. Most often it takes you to the subconscious mind, where you've got all sorts of memories in your cell tissue. There's only one person I've ever known to be good enough at hypnosis that got people off the planet. And that guy's Michael Newton. And if you have not read his books, go check him out. He's no longer alive, but he was the one. And I think the reason why he was so clean is he had a clinical background in psychology, and he approached his clients as a technician. And through synchronicity, it was one of the first books I ever read around 19 years old. Destiny of Souls. No, Journey of Souls, it's called. And even then I find little things that make me go, but very rarely. So I don't, Margaret, long answer. I hope you're loving this as much as I am, though, because I love talking about this stuff. And I like cleaning stuff up because there's a lot out there, and a lot of it has a lot of wonderful gems and usefulness, and a lot of it's, for me, just attached to some distortions, which are naturally part of the human psyche. Okay, so let me come back. And can current light efforts influence the outcome? Yes. I think I would say that, yes, current light efforts can absolutely influence outcomes. And I want to mention, I have so much to say, y'all. You have to know that as we are going through this darkness, we're being watched over like hawks by the spirit world, by energy, by light beings, by angels. I don't care how you call it, Jesus. We're being watched over like hawks. But you have to understand the way that world rolls when it comes to divine interventions and our lessons and classrooms here of co-creation, which I'm going to talk about soon because there's questions that ask that. So is it a foregone conclusion that, things are going to get worse? Yes and no. I think that things are karmically tipping to worse. And I'm going to answer that question. Let me do this. Let me answer that question more and more through each other question that comes in, because I want to move on to other questions here. But I'll leave you there for now. And if all events are happening simultaneously, that's not a paradigm I embrace. I think that's a cool, trippy thing to say, that, and dimensionally things are happening simultaneously. I don't think that's it. What it is this. The seeds of future lives are in this present moment. All that exists at all is a present moment, no matter which dimension you're in. Now, in other dimensions of consciousness, i.e., once you die and go back to other dimensions of consciousness, do we have different ways to access, like one would say, the Akashic record side of things? Absolutely. 100%. But that's for that realm. And even there, you're in the moment looking at the past. The present moment's all that exists. And as far as like a co-creative space, that's it. But the potential of, other lifetimes, if that's what's up. And the potential from and let's say karmic forces from past lives are all right here. Absolutely. But here's the thing, Margaret. Even the statement like future life memory is addressing time in a way that we address in this realm. Time is not addressed the same in other realms. What is the same as present moment energetics in creation? but time is not addressed the same in other realms. Once you hit this realm, this dimensional grid, we have, yes, past, present, future. So there's just too much in here that to me shakes about to take it too seriously. It's interesting. And I think that it makes for an interesting perspective. It's both and. There's truth in here, absolutely. And yet there's some things that don't completely click. Let me clarify as we go. Okay, so let's go to this next question. So are you guys getting questions together now? I'm sure I've got like 10 questions out of each of you just for that answer alone. Let's go back to the list from my Facebook poll. Okay, so, Bambi Miller, love this question. Dear Robert, in your amazing video last week and short, thank you, Bambi. You said that current events, the pandemic, climate change, and Ukraine crisis would possibly be around for the next 20 years. Can you say a bit more about that time frame and astrologically what you see regarding this? Thank you for your insights and spin on things. Bambi, I love this question. And it's Margaret, I'm so glad I answered yours first because it's a subset of yours in a way, because now we're talking about what's ahead, on this planet, not future lives, but this is the lesson of our times. This is the tipping point in human consciousness. When you hear we're becoming co-creators, it sounds so cool and everyone says it all the time, but they don't really know, frankly, what they're talking about. And I don't mean to make anyone wrong. They just don't know what that actually means. I mentioned in last week's live that one of the things we're learning is the relationship of co-creation when it comes to the individual and the individual's connection to the collective. These are inextricably linked in all of our journeys. I made my cases last time about that. Now, therefore, when it comes to what's being asked by Bambi here, which is more, what does the astrology of all this say? Are you coming from that statement of 20 years from an astrological lens? Do you know what? I'm actually not. But there is astrology for it. Absolutely. But the lens I'm coming from is knowing karmic grids and just getting it into it. This is intuitive. This is an intuitive sense of the timeline. Now, let me tell you why I'm saying 20 years. And how timing works. I'm saying 20 years because here's what's up. One, we have a climate on a roller coaster of change. I'm not sure if any of you read the article about how warm the poles, like North and South poles, are right now, but we should be scared as F about that because we have already destabilized the jet stream by the warming of the planet, and now there's no stability probably around coming at all. That's the stuff climate scientists dreaded and forecast 50 years ago. Or further back. We're in it now. This is it. So if you think it's bad, it's going to get much, much worse. 49 tornadoes tore through the south of my country in one day, just last week. And this is early spring. Dallas gets snow now. And also, by the way, Texas is struggling with wildfires. Yeah. So it doesn't take actually a strong intuition to know this is going to be a journey for some time. And this is the nature of the learning and growth for the next 2 decades. It's events like, yes, the Ukraine 100%. Are you still going to be? Think of these things as questions, because that's kind of what they are. It's like life as a co-creative force saying to you, okay, you have a slow contract to learn about co-creation. You want to know what that really means? It means this. It means you need to start asking these questions like this. Hey, do you want to create a climate inhospitable for you to live on this planet? That's a question for a co-creator. If you're a co-creator, you better be asking that question. And us as co-creators need to be asking that question. Now, instead, what we do is we let politicians tell us it's not true. Big oil gets a say. We get spell cast into not asking questions, but taking sides. And instead of asking questions, which life is saying, hey, my country, do you want to live in a country without universal health care? Is that what you want? Just answer the question. And then because of the pressures of big pharmaceutical companies and healthcare systems that are for profit, we get polarized politically and then take sides instead of asking and living in the question. And then we go without universal health care to our own peril for many people. We go with more and more extreme weather events. So right now, the messaging is this. Well, because we're not going to be taking oil and such from Russia, we need to reinstate the Keystone XL pipeline instead of. This is a great opportunity to get our ass on green energy. Because what do you think we're doing? What do you think karmically dominoed us here? Why do you think we're in this situation? And people are so tribal, cultishly tribal, meaning they do not think for themselves. They don't connect karmic dots. And they continue to go for their polarized tribal political narratives instead of asking questions of co-creation. Like, how can we co-create with the earth and its biospheric nature so that we can live on this planet without 49 tornadoes in one day? Rather, the slogan "Drill Baby Drill" is back. And then I get sometimes emailed as if I'm taking sides or revealing political leanings. Only someone who's taken a side could see me as taking sides. I'm in the questions of co-creation. Do you not get this? There's no sides here. There's choice and consequence. That is it. And that's as shrewd as co-creative lessons speak to you. They speak to you that shrewdly. We're here to learn karma from the point of view, not of shame or making anything wrong, but rather choice equals consequence. Now, what do you choose? Will you choose to live as one world? Now, I keep it real. I'm practical. I'm pragmatic. I'm not in fantasy, like I talked about last time. I'm in imagination. I'd like to think anyway. And I would say, hey, listen, we can't just go green because there's a world economy based around fossil fuels. We still need energies from fossil fuels. Keep it real. Do you drive an electric car? I drive a hybrid, but it's not fully electric. Most people don't drive electric cars. They're expensive. But here's the thing. Let's start somewhere. So when we look at questions like pandemic, climate change, Ukraine, let me ask you this question. How long do you think, given the read I just gave you on humanity, this partial little read, how long do you think it would take for all of what I just said, just that alone, to finally clean its ass up and start to live in co-creative questions? How long do you think? A couple decades maybe, or longer? And now you know how I got 20 years. So I think 20 is about right, because it's going to have to get so bad, just like any place in our lives where we don't live in co-creative questions and tell the truth. We hit a bad bottom. And we are the co-creators of how bad that bottom gets. So when you've got, in my country, half of the country in a political tribalism that believes an election was stolen, which is a lie, and that's their truth, how long do you think it takes for that to right itself? Does it ever? So, Bambi, you don't need astrology for this. I mean, astrology, and I'm not going out 20 years with astrology. It's just, that's too much, and most people it'd fry your brain. You need the karmic sensibility and shrewd perspective of human beings, and we can look to ourselves. Think of a pattern in your own life. I can think of about 5 that has been a bitch to shift. And it's not like you don't engage or try. You do. But just can't quite shift it yet. Well, the whole humanity's that way. What kind of bad bottoms have you hit in your life that had you shifted that pattern 3 years ago, you wouldn't be in them now? Or have visited them, whatever, you know? When I talk about the stages, of which there's 6 of a dark night cycle, which I've mapped in people, and I've often called since like 2009 when I wrote my book, 2008, The Dark Night of the Ego. When you look at those stages and apply them to humanity, and then micro down to a country, a political party, yourself, and ask, how long do you think it takes for that dark night cycle to see the light? It's exactly what I'm showing you right here. We're still a world that it will vote for people who don't actually care about us just because they have an R or D behind their name. That's where we are. So, yeah, there's karma all up in it. And until we come together as a populace, the word politics comes from polis, which is about the people. As soon as we come together as people and start to tell the truth about who represents us and how they don't care about us. They care about their book deals, their social media followers, how much airtime they get on a cable news channel. Now, I'm being extreme. Some do care. But we have to know and be able to see the ones that do and don't. People vote for people that want to take their health care away, that don't care that they're getting tornadoes in their backyard and their homes torn up, that don't care. They fake care when it's convenient. And that's what's true. I don't care what party you're part of. I really don't. That's why I'm an independent. It's the best way to be, or unaffiliated, whatever you want to call it. Now, before I digress, Judge Judy takes over the whole Q&A. Yeah, I think there's a very solid 20-year time frame on this, because let me just cap this up. There's going to be the next crisis. Ukraine, there was COVID, okay? Then now there's Ukraine. And then there will be, the climate change is still here. It's not going anywhere. So just consider the dominoes of that, in perpetuity here. And then yet there'll be another crisis. What about China and Taiwan? What about North Korea? Just recently launching new missiles. You think there aren't other crises that won't take 2 decades to get through on this planet? Really? And it's hard to see it all because there's so much. But I'm telling you, you've got to get holographic and spherical to understand. And I'm a realist. I've seen people in readings that I knew would take 5 to 10 years to get through their dark night. I didn't necessarily say that to them because, once again, I have wisdom not to just tell someone, hey, enjoy the darkness for a decade. But I knew enough to guide where they were in the process. And I also began to question, speaking of living questions, could this process be sped up if people actually became co-creative and engaged in their own dark night? Question I still live in and teach courses on all the time. All right. Great question, though. Great. Phenomenal question, Bambi. Maybe my favorite of the night, but Margaret, you're a close second. Okay. Coming off the heels of that, Peggy Folkt. Okay. In terms of balance between light and dark, I can see that the world getting darker might be a response to the increasing light and the shift towards it. Ooh, yes. Is that so? I guess I understand what it takes to be the light myself. Only how can I not just be the light, but also see the light? Because the dark seems to be so dominant. I think I'm going to need another gallon of ginger brew. These questions are so good. I really love your questions, everybody. It's just so They're opening up many library books. Here's some light. Yeah, I said some dark stuff just now. It is true. So I want you to get this image. I feel this to be very, very real. I haven't used this image for probably 15 years. I want you to image the earth. Now, if you know the chakra system, so you've got, if you know it, you know it. If you don't, you don't. But I'll just do a little crash course, hang with the imagery if you can. If you know the chakra system, it'll make more sense. But first chakra is, of course, this dense kind of manifested earthly realm. Second chakra, same thing, but survival level. Third chakra is now the communicative way that we kind of relate together and get a sense of value with each other. Fourth chakra is our collective heart. Fifth chakra, collective voice, will. Sixth chakra is our collective way to think and perceive through the mind. And then you get to the seventh chakra, which becomes this real kind of spiritual zone where we begin to access intuition, higher guidance from other realms that go above, because there's literally, I sense to be at least 12 chakras. Now, let me stop right there. When insight hits your system, or truth hits your system, or inspiration hits your system, if you could image it as coming down from the top down. So first hits your spiritual intuitive sense and energy senses, empathic senses, then gets to your head, and then your head computes it. Oh, this is intuitive guidance, and it's saying blah, blah, blah. Then it goes into the throat, and then, oh, now I got to choose. What do I choose about this guidance? Do I let it go further down my system, my co-creative system, like the heart? And I got to give a shout out to Carolyn Mace for some of what I'm saying, because she pioneered a lot of this intermedical intuitive model. And then, you get to your heart, and then you get to your, how do I feel about it here? And then where do I have the esteem for it? Do I have the resources and energy? Second chakra. And can I be patient enough? And do I know how to work with the co-creative earthly laws here, like time, discipline, commitment? Let me just sum it up. Mountain climbing. Do I have the skills of a mountain climber? That's all first chakra. So now imagine this at a planetary level. Imagine the Earth has a chakra system. And as part of the co-creative cycles of Earth herself, there's timing. And if I were to now flip switches, I'd go, yeah, that's exactly what the astrological ages, which are about, let's say, 2,100 years, show us. The dominant, energetic, and creative pattern of that age. And that creative energy has nothing to do with you on a soul level, per se. It's the earth. So we get so human-centric, like, well, it's all about us here. No. I don't know how many other billions of species are on the planet, but we're not the only one, clearly. And the Earth has its own chakra system and timing and creative process. And that's where Bambi, the astrology, comes in to see it. It's brilliant. It maps it exquisitely. When you're born, you come through its chakra system into its first chakra and show up here and have your own micro version of that chakra system while you're on the planet. Now, imagine what the age of Aquarius is, which is coming in as a new creative force hitting the Earth's chakra systems. Imagine it simply as light. New light's coming in. What now? Let's give language to it, Aquarian language to the light. The light is this: you are one world. In the Pisces age, the light was all is one. All is one. Supreme mystical truth. All is one. Not, by the way, a mental truth. This is mystic territory. Your mind evaporates there. But what the Aquarian light is, to some degree, is a mentalization of that truth to some degree with an intuitive mind and knowing, which is what the internet is. It's a manifestation of this light. All is one. You are one global mind now. And when I've seen people in readings, and let's say what a dark night is, it's the clearing away. Let me say it this way, and listen and listen and listen. Oof. What a dark night is essentially, it's new light hitting your system that causes and necessitates, is a better word, necessitate. A new light hitting your system that necessitates wherever you block the light to die. That's the dark night. So that light could, in fact, move through your system, through every chakra in you, with new creative archetypal forces, administering that creative light out into your life. And the darkness is, and that's why I call it the dark night of the human ego. It's the darkness of any identity that says to that light, get the F out of here. No. You're too damn bright. I like my little sense of certainty and control here. So you can F right off. But the co-creative laws don't care about your swearing and your protesting. So you just basically, what you really did is said, give me a dark night and maybe I'll think about it. And then the dark night comes, and then the question does become, this is a co-creative question. How dark do you want it? This is a question the world's asking now with the war in Ukraine. How dark are we going to go here? How dark are you going to go, Putin? Chemical weapons next? Nuclear? How dark's it going to be? And then how dark are we going to, how much will we match your dark? What are we going to have to do to light you up? Can we light you up? No? Okay, what are our options then? So the whole world, this is my point, the earth is getting a download of light and has for the last 100 years. We're in a transitional era. You signed up for it. Your soul agreement has this embedded in it as a clause. It is not something you can negotiate. It's just what's true. You're in an era of light transition. You're in an era of a dark night. At a world level, what do you think global climate change is? It's a world event. What do you think pandemics are? They're world events. What do you think wars can become? World events. That's why they're called world wars. So lights hitting, and yes, Peggy, activating the dark that's basically saying, get the F out of here. I don't want to be one world. We're communist. We're socialist. We're an oligarchy. We're a dictatorship. What you want? Oh, light and love up in here? Forget it. Out. I'll sarin gas everyone if you don't leave. So there's an interesting paradox, what Peggy touches on, that the activation of the dark is actually a side effect of new light. And I would micro that to your own life and say, your own life, every transformation you've probably been through, the same phenomena has been in play. Now, there's exceptions where just, man, you just give it up, you surrender in that instant and you transform. Those are rare. Those are very rare. I rarely saw those in readings. What I more often saw, at least 90% of the time, was the dark night process. And I'm speaking from someone that goes through dark nights right with you. Trust me, I am not some quick and light me up and instantaneously, ooh, look at my wonderful new archetypal team and new life. It's how I know this so well. I live it as well. Countries live this. The world is living it. So yeah, we can talk about, hey, there's new light here. And there is. But if you don't understand the co-creative mechanics of how a chakra system works, the human psyche works when light hits it. Light brings uncertainty. Because what does it do? It illumines a new truth. What does a new truth do? It illumines a new paradigm of reality. What does that do? Put you right into uncertainty. Everything you thought you knew or believed in now has shifted. And back to Carolyn Mace, one of the things she told me over dinner was that she saw in medical intuitive readings, people would rather die than change all the time. And we can look at that by looking at every dead addict that went through treatment, but just couldn't change. And that's real. My dad was one of them. So, and my mom and brother, they decided to live. They decided to change. What we can do is work on our relationship with uncertainty and hopefully understand it's where miracles come from. It's where revolutions come from. It's where innovation comes from, inspiration. It comes from uncertainty, folks. It doesn't come from what you know. It does not come from what you know. Miracles don't come from what you know or what you think you know. The more we can become magicians with uncertainty and empathic soul and love rebels, these are courses I have taught for a reason, because they're courses for our time. And I guarantee you, every one of those courses has shadow work and a dark night mapping in it. Every single one of them, for a reason. And if you've taken them, you know. So, can we be with this as light technicians and cultivate a new relationship with uncertainty in our life? That's the best way I think you can really relate to the light. The dark, we know the dark. We know it. We have got how many, 10,000 years of history here of dark references we can go to. What dark is, what it does, how it works. This is not new. The light is. But yeah, it activates the dark. And this is perhaps where some of that Christian mythology of the light and the dark battling it out, go at it. But you have to understand something about this kind of light. And I think I'm going to go to, yes, Monica. So I'm going to go to this question. I'm skipping down, and then I'm going to take your questions. I'm going to come to you live, people. I'm sure I got you all on fire with questions. So Monica asks this. So I'm tagging into Peggy's question. Could you please give us a few examples on how to work with our mystic? And if you're not a student of mine, and if you're kind of new to my language or what I do, I'm very drenched in archetypes, but in a very different way. There's a little Jungian in me, yep. Little Mace in me, yep. And then everything else is innovated and integrated into something else. I look at archetypes in the subconscious. I look at archetypal teams in you. I look at archetypes that are part of a dark night process. I look at your archetypes through an astrological mapping, which is brilliant for it. So I do have a system, but it's not anything you would actually know. You'd know pieces of it. That said, the mystic is an archetype in us. And it even transcends, if you will, that box, because it is simply a spiritual force in you and me in life. And it's not one, once again, the mind can fully engage and comprehend. That's why we need art, we need symbol, we need myth, we need story to understand and come to know the mystical realm, because that goes past our human mind and accesses the soul, which is, your mystic in part. So how can let's talk about the light and the mystic in this question. Most of us associate the light as something that's opposite dark, but mystical light is not that at all. So when I say new light is hitting the chakra system of planet Earth, I don't mean this big light pulse beam that opposes dark at all. That's actually not what mystical light is. Because when we're at a mystical level of consciousness, all is one. There is no light versus dark there. There's just this light that is both and. It's all, period. Now, as I say that, your mind's probably frying. Right. Mystical territory fries your mind. You can't think it. You just can't. But you can feel it here. You can feel it here. So, and it can be experienced as a battle of light and dark in us. Because mystical light, while it's not the opposite of dark, it does activate anything in us that's been polarized or fragmented or fractured. But not to have a World War III inside of you, to unite into other higher, if you will, and it's not hierarchical, but I'm going to use that word anyway, higher understanding, higher choice. A choice that, let me say it this way, choices your soul would make, or your heart. So how can we work more with the mystic? Well, I would first of all get out of either or. Get out of either or, get out of either or. Please leave that at the door. That is keep you from mystical consciousness again and again. And I know it's sort of countercultural, because even in our spiritual traditions, not religious, but spiritual, there's a lot of either or. It's all up in many spiritual texts, which are considered gold standards. I could pull them off the shelf and go through them and show you every either or. And you know how I know this? Because I've seen it in your psyche. I've seen it in the psyche of thousands of people, how certain spiritual books code in, just like fundamentalist thought, but in New Age spiritual language. It's actually a spiritual practice, a mystical practice, to watch your either or every day and get curious about your both and. You want to know how to work more with your mystic? Get curious about your both and. Get curious about it. And that doesn't mean you tell yourself a story like this. What's the both and of the war in Ukraine? Well, I'm going to hang out just in my head and know that, it's happening because there's more light hitting the earth. Absolutely not. That's not what I mean. That's not what, that just opted you out of giving a shit. I ain't interested in that. That's what our minds do. That's why we'd rather go to a conspiracy theory than look at a baby dead on the street in Maripol. Because that would break our heart. And most of us don't know how to be with a broken heart. So I'd rather, the Ukrainians, they had secret labs of chemical weapons development. Okay, let's say they did. So what? So effing what? We don't care about them then? They're not worthy of living? Is that what you're telling me? Because that's what I just heard you tell me. Let me not even address your conspiracy. Let me just address you. You're on record, sole record for that now. I didn't have to care because they had chemical weapons. Okay. You're not lying to your angels. So good luck with that. And this is the both and. I can say that with total Judge Judy. And that comes from my love rebel. That comes from a place in me that actually gives a shit about you and that baby. And then you can either or me and be like, oh, he's a spiritual teacher. Look at him, the way he talks. Go for it. I don't care. I live with me. You don't. I know my intentions. And I see through you. I really actually do. That's my skill. So, okay, let's do this. And I still love you. I really do. You think I'm choosing sides? I'm not. I'm in co-creative questions. Where are you? That's a conspiracy. I don't know. Have you seen those labs? Are you in Ukraine? Where's the proof? You got proof? Like literal proof? You were there? No, you weren't. No, you weren't. I haven't seen you leave your state, let alone your town. So, you want a better relationship with your mystic in the light? I just gave you one. Now, we all are that person. I don't want to make anyone wrong. We're all a version of that, because it sucks to feel heartbreak. It sucks bad. It's devastating to see what's happening. And let's throw more layers in. Hey, this happened in Syria, and I want you to know something. I talked about Syria all the time in my courses when that was happening, all the time. And yeah, our media is pretty effed up and doesn't cover a lot of stuff. Absolutely true, both and. And we should still care about Ukraine, by the way. Don't you think? Or you don't think that? I'm not sure. So these are the metrics of how you can kind of internally shake your shit out and be like, where's my heart in all this? And then, where's my soul? Where is my soul? Now, love your questions, you guys. Let me take some cues from you. So, cues, let's do this. I'm looking at the chat. Give me what you got. We'll put it on the screen, and I'll give you what I got on it. And I've got some other questions here I can also take. This is real talk. Thank you very much. Ain't nobody got time for fake talk. All right. Thank you, Monica. Love you. I love you so much. Wonderful. Daria. Okay. I'm glad you guys are picking up what I'm putting down. So I'm going to just be hanging and waiting for a question. If I don't see one, I'll go back to my list, but I'm sure you're just digesting. I know it can be a lot to catch up with. And like I said, anything Ukraine adjacent, the world, it's all good. Peggy. Dankeschön, Peggy. Das freut mich. Okay, Amy Stifter. All right, let's do this, Amy. Okay, I got to grab you. There we go. Amy Stifter, thank you for, by the way, I know it's kind of vulnerable to put yourself out there in front of thousands of people. I've got about 50,000 people collectively watching this at any given time. So I've had a thought question. How does the physical fight represent the internal fight in each of us? And if we clean up our own internal, could that clean up the outward fight? I love this question, and I'm going to leave it up for a minute. It kind of blocks me, but whatever. Just so we can all kind of center on it. What Amy's really asking is a question, even just a thought a lot of people have that I think is true. That if you pull from, let's say if you do your own shadow work, which is a lot of what she's saying, how does the physical fight represent the internal fight? I'm going to use other language, shadow work, and then I'll apply it to your actual literal language. Does that somehow lighten the load of the world? Abso-freaking-lutely. It does. And once you and what it also does, by the way, is it gives you a compassion for when you see people doing harm that is hard to be compassionate about, because you can relate to a time when you did self-harm and you had your own inner dragon to hug. I don't slay dragons in my classroom, we hug them. And you had to get to some place of self-love and acceptance about something in yourself that you were literally in an internal fight about. There was almost like a dark and light battle in you. And so back to the mystical medicine. Dark and light battles don't resolve it necessarily. I have to be careful about this, because it matters based on which dimension we're talking about. let's just stay with internal. So just be clear, I'm talking about your internal dark and light battle. That doesn't harmonize at the level of the battle. You have to get to a different consciousness. And I'm going to say mystical consciousness. And here's the thing about mystical consciousness. And I gave a little example of this at the very end of last week. In mystical consciousness, we don't make anything wrong, which is really radical to say about ourselves. We don't make anything wrong about ourselves. Even our addict, even our liar, even our denier, they, if they're in us, get to be here. They're already here. And the way I look at them, I would call those archetypes in you. I would call those patterns in you that manage something in you. Something that you don't know how to manage any other way yet, I'm going to assume. It's not always the case, but let's just go with that. And then the dark night, what it offers is another way to manage whatever those forces were managing that allows more creative light to flow through you. So the addict in us manages many things, but let me just go with one thread. Our inability to be with life as it is emotionally. And there's many reasons why we can't be with life unconditionally in an emotional way. Like we had alcoholic parents that kicked the shit out of us. I know what that's like. So we have to have some other force because at 5 years old, we had nothing else. That's part of what true spirituality, psycho-spirituality is to me. It's learning new patterns, new internal forces, archetypes that manage what our saboteur team managed before. But to get there, to Amy's question, there's often a battle. It feels like that. Absolutely. I relate to that 100%. It feels like a war between the dark and the light. Yeah. But as you get to the mystical level of yourself, you realize this isn't about dark or light. This is about managing my vulnerability, my low esteem, my horrific relationship with uncertainty. Because, hey, things were uncertain when I was a kid, and it didn't go so well. Suck you my addict. Thanks, Mystic. See you later. This way I can get high on a dime, check out, and there you go. That's my management system. But it's not sustainable. And you disincarnate yourself through it in an addiction. You actually literally leave the moment. That's disincarnation. I have a story I could tell you about that, but I want to keep it tight. About someone I knew who literally saw that phenomena in somebody. Now, back to Amy's question, how does this physical fight in Ukraine represent the internal fight in each of us? There's so much in there, Amy, and everyone. And I was just reading an article on this regarding the rise of, in our internet age and cable news age, of propaganda and misinformation, disinformation, and toxic political tribalism, that all of that's manifesting in Ukraine right now. And if we were to take it to our interiors, I'd have to ask you, all right, let's talk about your inner Fox News. Let's talk about your inner CNN. Let's talk about your inner MSNBC. I want to know what those voices, how they talk to you, what they say. You think it's just a cable news channel you watch? No, it's an inner news channel. So you want to know where those sorts of limited perspectives and narratives go? Oftentimes lies go, depending on the network. Look at Ukraine. You want your country not to head that way? All right. Let's demand more from news media. All of us. I don't care what channel you watch. I really don't. There's some that are, the lesser of evils. I absolutely agree. But they all slant and produce to evoke your attention. All of them. All of them. I took a unintentional news media break because of a family crisis this winter. When I came back, it hurt my eyes, it hurt my ears, it hurt my soul. Because we're so attuned and acculturated. And now I see so clearly, and admittedly, I don't watch Fox News, but I do watch other channels, and I see so clearly with the way the narrative slants. And we're all in trouble. It's all about ratings, folks. Welcome to a capitalist, corporatized, democratic way to live, or I guess somewhat democratic. So once again, if we the people said, hey, until you tell the whole truth and get your talking heads and your propagandists and your points of viewers off your channel, I'm not watching you. But when you're ready to actually report mostly real stuff without any angled bias or just flat out lies, until you're ready to do that, I'm not watching you. I will not let that in my soul. So there's an internal way we can start to go, okay, and question it. Is this the full story? What's left out? Now, obviously, when you're seeing, imagery and video from Ukraine, that's real. That is, but what aren't they showing? And that doesn't mean you fill that in with conspiracy. Let me be clear. No. You just live in that question with your own intuition. This isn't about, well, let me go consult the next YouTube conspiracy theorist. Absolutely not. I don't think people realize how shocking to the soul that kind of shit is, and dangerous. And we will be, all of us, in the same form or other situation as Ukraine if we do not, we the people, start to actually pressure change. We have power. We could come together. If we wanted, if you and I and all of us decided we're ending world hunger right now, done. We're taking on climate change right now with some first steps that are practically able to be implemented. Done. Done. This is what it means to live in a co-creative society and understand co-creation. This is the new teaching. This is the incoming light of one world consciousness. We the people. So the physical fight to me does represent, to some degree, in many things. I can never speak to it all. It's so much bigger than I can cover, but it does represent some of these elements. We have to start to look at what were the karmic forces. Do the karmic mapping as best you can. That led to where we are here. And I said imagination last week is a force that we need to be engaged in. Putin sure was. He could imagine an invasion to Ukraine, but no one else could. Oh, they're not going to do that. They lacked imagination. Now, his imagination didn't calculate the spirit of the Ukrainians, and he's, mixed up in a blender right now. But he imagined it. No one could have imagined a Holocaust, but Hitler could. Your imagination, our imaginations, we might want to do a holistic inventory of just what they can do. And if you lack imagination, someone else doesn't. And that goes either way. No one could have imagined Martin Luther King Jr. being the force he became. And once they caught up to it, he got taken out. So, yeah, you want some real talk? I love your question, Amy. I left that up forever. Thank you so much for the vulnerability of actually saying that, asking that publicly. I know that anytime we ask a question, by the way, your questions will be put up here. So if you don't feel comfortable asking a question, no worry. You can always write ahead of time. That's why I try to give space ahead of time. And you can always tell me ahead of time, by the way, that you don't want me to use your name. No problem there. Okay. All right. Let me see what we got. Let me see here. Okay, this is a good question. All right. Karen Kelly Gibbons. Now, I think this is Ukraine adjacent. It's a little more, because it does apply to, I think, all of us opening our hearts and engaging our hearts. What does it look like to hug your dragons on a daily basis? This seems like mystical work on another level. What are examples of what that could look like? Well, I think it's about really watching that part of you. Might be your perfectionist. I know that part so well. That continues to make yourself wrong. That lives in shoulds and shouldn'ts. That, you speak to yourself that way. That's a dragon to me. And then ask, well, what does it manage? And then the first place I would go to, well, perfectionism as an archetype, the perfectionist manages your shame. If you are perfect, no one can judge you. No one can shame you. You're perfect. You're beyond reproach. You can't shame me. I'm perfect. Now, obviously, that doesn't exist. It's an adaptation, by the way, that is culturally part of our psychic DNA and archetypal DNA. We're a perfectionist society and culture. This is where it's a very, very hard voice to silence. So we don't try to silence it. We hug it with our mystic. And we say, listen, you can tell yourself this story. It's okay. You get to be here, perfectionist. You help me survive a fundamentalist household, an either-or parenting experience, a culture that said you were wrong because you're gay. So thank you. You helped me out when I had nothing else. But now I got other things, like my mystic, who in me just knows I'm enough no matter what. I have something called soul esteem. There's no should or shouldn't. There's just, hey, I am who I am, and it's enough. Now, the co-creator in me also knows that there's karma and choice equals consequence. So I can be enough and also both and be accountable. But that's not perfectionism. There's not should or shouldn't. There's, I get to make different choices than I used to for a different karmic outcome that is self-connecting, nourishing, kind to myself and others. That's one example. Great question. Karen, bringing the thunder up in here. Okay. How do I take it back down? That's the question. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay. So how y'all doing? How's everybody doing? Let's see what other questions you got here. And I may come back to, okay, cool. I'm going to come back to some great questions that were written, and I'm going to come back to some of those. You guys, I'll come back to you one more time. So if you have questions, write them down, get them in your head, and when you're ready, let's do it. Let's say, okay, so Pam from my membership asked this question. Hello, gorgeous Pam. I never disagree with Robert or even get triggered. Please, you're triggered all the time. No, I'm just kidding. Well, okay. She says, okay, well, rarely get triggered. I don't think this is actually on my list on here. No, it's not. Okay. It's okay. It's short. I rarely get triggered. Oddly enough, I actually sometimes in a session finish his thought out loud before he says it. However, I did disagree on Friday, that was last week, in talking about stepping out of your depression, low or negative feelings to go volunteer or help others. How the heck is that not denial? How is that not snapping yourself out of exactly what you need to be feeling through? This is the post link. Okay, this is from my assistant. All right, so great question and needs just clarification, because actually it's funny. This is a funny thing. So Pam, I'm gonna task you to this. Go back and watch what I said again, because I did say there's times when this is not the medicine. There's times when going out and helping people is not the medicine. You don't have it to give. Absolutely, absolutely. I did actually say that. But it's interesting how we all will hear something once we get into a triggered state, and not hear other things. This happens a lot. I get emails, as you can probably imagine, on my website where I'm like, I didn't even say that. But someone's too triggered, and I've done the same thing. I mean, you just do, right? It's like, oh, then whatever's triggered rises up to read and see and take in the rest and omits versus various things. So I would just offer that. But there's more here I want to clarify and kind of riff around with because I think it's really useful to actually mention. If, let's say, however, the medicine was to volunteer, the clarification that I'd like to offer is this. When it comes to processing emotional energy or emotions, absolutely, denial is not helpful. It'll send you to your addictions. It'll send you to your perfectionist. It'll send you to your mind. And that's not useful or helpful to moving through the emotion. I want you to consider, because it's true, that you actually have an emotional intuitive system. Our intuition has different branches in us as an overall intuitive system. So there's an emotional intuitive system. Just one other example, there's a somatic intuitive system when you feel things in your actual body that are speaking to you about something in your life. Or if you're an actual intuitive, a lot of times you'll see this with really good psychic mediums, they'll feel things in their body. There's a question coming up about this, by the way, that it's not happening really to them. It happened to someone who passed, or it's happening to someone you know, and you're feeling it somatically in your meaning of the soma, in the body. So just another example of another branch of your intuitive system. Now in my podcast that's coming up this summer, it's really going to be primarily, frankly, at least initially, very educational on these things. I want to talk about the intuitive system and its branches, and how to know which branch is talking to you. Now, emotions are tricky, but they're always guiding. And I have to say caveats to clarify that. So if I have an emotion that's triggered, that could be something I call mystical triggering. So before I define that, let me tell you about traumatic triggering, which is probably mostly what you know something about already. If we've been traumatized in the past by something, or disempowered in some way through abuse, societal inequalities that play out at, let's say, the level of law or class in our cultures, that's trauma. If we've been traumatized in any regard, in any way, there is a bit of a snag in our psyche that I would say creates a time warp. And it's a snag, meaning a traumatic anchor's dropped at that time you were traumatized. And then, depending on when that is, whatever is available, your subconscious goes, okay, I need to recruit the addict, get over here. I need to recruit amnesia. Okay, we're not going to remember this for a while. I need to recruit whatever your subconscious needs to recruit for you so you can move through that trauma. Having not processed it, there's an anchor here. But move through it and now get forward enough to continue to grow into life. That has now anchored you in a time warp. The time warp is experienced when something in your present time triggers the anchor. You go right back to where the anchor is. Now, a lot of triggering deals in that. That's traumatic triggering. And that comes through your emotional system. That's my point. And it's still guiding. How's it guiding? It's an energetic emotional experience that takes you back in time to somewhere where you need to unanchor. You need to integrate something there, usually with help, right? Therapist. As an intuitive, and I have a background in psychology and psychotherapy to some degree, but that wasn't my main feature. I'm a technical reporter. So I can see the anchor, and then I'll send you to the therapist to help you unanchor, because I don't do that work. So, or a healer, whatever it might be, spiritual director even, depending on the anchor. Now, that said, once you unanchor, the trigger has been neutralized, usually not completely, but sometimes from like, let's say level 8 to level 3. That's a great, I think, coming down, such that when you hit that level 3 in present time, you don't really go back. You kind of contain it in the moment, feel through it, and then bring some mystical juju up in here. Call a friend, go see your therapist, work it out, but you stay here. So emotions are useful, I think, no matter what they are, and especially actually dark ones. But I will tell you, joy will take you back to a trauma trigger, just like, someone calling you a name on the street that, takes you back to when you were called that name and beat up. So this human psyche is fascinating. Could talk about it forever. But what I mean to say here is this. If you have a trigger, or listen, no, if you're feeling a dark energy, depression, or negative feelings, dark feelings, the first thing is just to acknowledge that's what you feel. You can do that. This is both and still go help other people. There's times when that's great medicine. And then there's times, to your point, Pam, when it's not. It just really depends on where you are in everything I just mentioned. So if it's like, look, dude, today just had a life-threatening medical diagnosis, not so interested in helping people, then you're not. And that's your truth. That's your guidance. But if you're looping, and that's the key for me in this medicine of helping others, if you're looping in negative mental sets, if you're looping in dark feelings, which is not processing, that's looping. Processing, and by the way, processing is a cycle, and it can take as long as it takes. I only got 5 minutes for grief. You better hurry up, grief. It doesn't work that way. You process it, and I'll always be grieving the death of my father. I'll always be grieving, the loss of pets. But, I don't loop around. So if you're in that dark looping, one way out that I've seen be very powerful, because it connects you to a greater power grid than the loops grid, is to go help other people. And so when you hear that, as we've all heard, and I'm not a fan of it from the point of view of, hey, F you, I feel like crap, I got deep trauma I'm trying to integrate with a therapist, I'm too vulnerable to go out and start helping others in a soup kitchen. Okay, don't. But if you're in a loop and you cannot stop the loop, you got to do something to break the loop. I'd say plug into a greater power grid is a great way to go. Yeah, go help out that soup kitchen. Realize, you know what? Shit, I'm not the only one that suffers or has a hard time or is in a dark night. Look at all these people. They have nowhere to live. Wow. I am genuinely, keyword, grateful. And if they can get through what they're going through, I can get through this. When you say that, you're in a greater power grid than your own, because you only get through things through greater power. Your power alone never pulls anything off completely. So I love your question. I absolutely love it. I'm glad you got a little confused. Happy to clarify. Wonderful. That's a great question. Okay. Anyone got a question for me up here? Bring it. Absolutely, Diane. There are biochemical reasons in the brain. There's so much more going on in many various depressions and stuff. Absolutely. That's where I pass you off to a psychiatrist or psychotherapist who has probably greater wisdom. This is just one dose of medicine that I've seen work. It doesn't mean it works for everybody at certain times. Absolutely. Great point. All right. Yes, I feel you, Lisa. I watch these Ukrainian refugees and I feel better. Well, it's kind of sick to say that, but I feel both and. I feel better and worse. it makes me happy. Many of these European countries are taking them in. But I will mention also, there's light and dark in all of it. I mean, not all the dark-skinned people are being treated as equally in this refugee crisis that we're in Ukraine. So we got work to do. I mean, by that I mean humanity. All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's look at this one from Janie. You got to check out to check in. That's fine. But politics ain't going anywhere. So I'm just saying. But I say that with love. All right, Darren Redfern. What do you intuit the impact will be of the consecration of Russia and the Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary that was done earlier today by the Pope and bishops around the world? Well, listen. There's ceremony, and then there's ceremony. I grew up Catholic and went to Catholic grade school and high school. And in Catholic grade school, we went to church every day, literally every day, every morning. That's how I started my school day. And for me personally, when I was in the mass, it was just mechanics. I had no heart in it. I mean, I was barely awake. I was bemoaning being up so early. And that was ceremony, not ceremony, right? So I think to your point, anything that's done with true soul and intentionality, that's where grace activates and comes alive. Like people say, go pray for someone you don't like. Well, if you can't really say a genuine prayer, don't. I say, you're not praying. You're just trying to make your conscience feel better because someone just shamed you. How about you do this prayer? Universe, I can't send that person grace because I don't like them. You do it. I want you to do it. I genuinely do, but it is not going to come from me. And this isn't a grace to control them, so I like them. Send them whatever light they can handle. That's all I got. That's more honest, and the intentionality is real and it's clear. So, I think that's what I would say. Now, I didn't see the ceremony, so I don't know what happened. I would like to think that, religion, I obviously have challenges with it for a lot of the damage it's done, and also appreciation for it, both and for all the light it does give. I think a lot of our struggles in community and in politics stem from a lack of the communities religion used to actually form, when people really went to church and talked to their neighbors and from all across different political spectrums and points of view. And I think we need some form of that communal gathering back, not necessarily a religious form, but some kind of thing like that would be good medicine for our times. But I don't know. I think, but what I would say is, all light, and it depends on the intention of the light and those sending the light and how you're working with mystical energy, and we'll do what it can within the karma, and it does influence and matter 100%. I mean, there are studies medically with prayer and many things that prove this to some degree, and I think there's elements of it that we just know in our hearts it matters. That's why we do it. I pray and light candles every day. And if I've gotten to 3:00 in the afternoon and I haven't done that, I feel it in my house. I feel like, I didn't wake up the light this morning. And so I feel it. It absolutely is very powerful. And my hope is that the imagination of this consecration of Russia blesses, it's not just the Ukraine that needs light, Russia needs it too. Let's remember, this is as Carolyn Mace has been saying, it's the age of the unthinkable. I'd say it's the age of the unimaginable. Who could have imagined? That's just that we need to expand our imagination on all spectrums, light and dark, a little bit further, I think. But great question. Love it. I just thought it'd be a nice way to talk about light. And it does matter. It really, really does matter. I think more than we can know sometimes even in this life. And then when we go home, so to speak, we really get to the full tally of just how much every prayer mattered. That was not petitious, but intentional and full of heart. Love it. Okay, let's take another question from my list, and then I'm going to wrap it up soon. Let's see. I like this question. So it's not in my list, but I think it's a cool one. I think it's something you all might actually have thought about before, and it does kind of stays on the thread of where we've been tonight. So this is from someone that I believe is in my membership. I'm not sure. Linda asks, I've been thinking about some things Robert, me, said last Friday night about Putin and his darkness. I'm having difficulty connecting this to mystical truths such as, we are all one. What's true at the micro level is true at the macro level. The level of this level of reality is illusion. The ability to turn lead to gold through alchemy, etc. These are spiritual. By the way, these are just sort of things that she's trying to compute with what I said last time. I love this question. This will probably be my last one, everybody, because this is going to take a little while to answer. Is there an archetype of evil? For example, Hitler, he who shall not be named, Voldemort, Darth Vader, Big Bad Wolf, etc. I think my question boils down to, if we really believe all is one, how can you say Putin is so dark he has no light? Does this mean he is not part of the one? Is there something besides the one or wholeness? Is this just a duality, dark versus light? Please know I believe Putin is very dark, and I believe we all have some darkness as well as light. I'm simply having trouble integrating some of what I think you said last week. Can you enlighten me? Awesome question. I mean, how many of you actually relate to that? I would imagine that you are relating to a lot of that. And this is wonderful, because what this question actually presents is where we can be at in our mind with spiritual truth, and where our mind can't go, and why we go, well, this isn't computing, because you're trying to approach something at the level of the mind. And so let me riff this out. We are all one. Now, that's just what's true. I can't, it's a truth I can't even be like, oh, I feel that daily. No, I don't. All it takes is, someone pissing me off, and I don't think we're one at all anymore. Or watching someone be an ass to someone else. Yeah, I have a strong advocate, so watch out, But we are all one, and it's a truth that the mind cannot wrap around. We can't. So we can just leave it there. We don't have to figure it out. I think it's an important compass. Now, the way it becomes a compass is the question, actually. How can knowing that we're mental creatures in a mentalized culture that actually, if you think about it, encourages us to be oftentimes heartless, not hurtful. How do we reference this compass all as one beyond with something other than the mind? Well, that's where this comes in. So is what's true at the micro level true at the macro level? Yeah. And yet maybe not. Both and. That's a big question. Once again, I can't go further into why I would say both and on that, but I would say yes and no. What's true at the macro and is true at the micro. What I think I would say is that co-creative law is consistent, dimension to dimension, yeah. But how the law operates is not consistent, dimension to dimension. So that's where I say no. I know, you take a class with me, we'll dive into that. This level of reality is an illusion. I think that's absolutely bullshit. That just does not resonate with me. And I'm not putting you down, Linda, at all. That's something that has been misconstrued out of a certain interpretation of Buddhism. So let me break it down. This level of reality is not an illusion. That actually is also, by the way, a byproduct of the Judeo-Christian heaven and earth split, which does not just exist in Judeo-Christian religious circles. That's actually in a lot of different circles. Hinduism has it. Judaism has it. Buddhism, certain forms of Buddhism carry, while it's in different language, a heaven and earth split. If I were to say to you, your whole journey of soul is to finally get off the wheel of karma, i.e. incarnate, I just made this a lesser realm. I'm calling bullshit. No, it ain't. All is one. It is as of much value as any other dimension that exists. Where are you getting that? Where are you getting that thinking? I don't see it in your psyche as a truth other than what's programmed in the dualism of your psyche. Beyond that, it's not true. When you go to the other side, I absolutely put my soul on this. I guarantee you, you will see that this dimension was just as real and of value as any other. The difference is this, but it's true in every dimension. The illusion is that there's permanence. That's the Buddhist teaching. This is not permanent. If you think it is, you're an illusion. Absolutely true. If you think anything in this dimension is permanent, you're absolutely an illusion. Things change every second. You've become a different person the last 2 hours we've been sitting here. And so have I. Some micro way or macro. That's the illusion. This is not to be demeaned as lesser than heaven, like the Judeo-Christian paradigm purports. It is as valuable as all of creation because all is one. And this is the challenge that I've covered in course after course. And my perspective on this comes from knowing your psyche and watching what the split does to you and how you treat yourself and everyone else and your life at large. There's things in your life you devalue and put in hierarchical value to other things because of this very split I'm talking about right now. And I could walk into your house and go to your spiritual bookshelf and pull out tons of books that reinforce the same bullshit to me. And it causes you to suffer. Said from my love rebel. So, this is not an illusion. This pen is very real. It just vibrates at a different rate than a ghost. A ghost is just as real. There's just no permanence. My whole house won't be here in 100 years, I would imagine. Surely I won't. Nor will you. If you think we will be, well, that's illusion. So, I hope we're clear. It's an absolute pleasure to clarify that for you. Turning lead to gold through alchemy. I'm not going to quite address that because I want to get down to this one that and kind of get into the mix of I think what you're really asking is let's just frame it this way: was Hitler, is Putin, are these dark forces part of God? Yeah. And as I say that, I just jammed your mind because we're programmed into, if we're honest, well, pedophiles aren't part of God, rapists aren't part of God, murderers aren't part of God, but they actually are. That was Christ's teaching. Now, we don't step back to ask ourselves this co-creative question of our time. How did we co-create a Hitler? We co-create a Vladimir Putin. We co-create a Donald Trump. We co-create, fill in any dark figure that's dark for you. I think I've gone through my list. because it's a we. It's a we that does it. Hitler got to where he was in power through others. He didn't pull off his horror alone. Oh my frickin' God. So when we get into co-creation for our time, we have to ask, hey, is there some way we generate these figures? And if so, how? What would be the medicine? Well, here we go. You want to get your soul and heart on the line and your soul's record open for new entries? I'm on it right now. This is living in co-creative questions, not taking sides. This is it. Going, you know what? Yeah, we need to ask how we, me, you, everyone created climate change. I did. I drive a car. You drive a car. Use gas at your house. Use electricity. I do. I'm not here some leftist talking about climate change, for fuck's sake. I'm telling you, we do this. And the cool thing is when we step into the we, now we're back to actual solutions and choice. But if it's me versus you, we ain't going anywhere except to Ukraine and Russia. That's where we go. So this is this is where your spirituality, for all of its whatever, hits the streets. Right here. And we're not going to do this perfectly. And there's a lot that, like I said, are we going to just flip a switch and go green? That is actually not practically realizable. It's just not. I know AOC has a different vision. It's a vision. Not all visions are practically realizable. They're meant to be compasses and North Stars. Great. But they're not. They take time. You have to understand and intuitively read the mass consciousness, and you got to read the room and know how to speak to people at a level that's not going to activate toxic political tribalism, but activate the we of us. So now, I said a radical statement apparently for a lot of people, and I did get some emails on my website about this and saw some comments that Putin was so dark he couldn't be lit up. I stand by that because I can see intuitively, this is the intuitive in me talking, that we can bind him in light, but you're not lighting up this man's psyche. There are horrors this man has done you have no idea about. And if you did, you would know where I come from when I say that. We like to believe in there's always the hero version of things. I'm sorry, sometimes that's not true. Sometimes it is. Sometimes light can shift someone. And then someone wrote in, an example of an old Indian Buddhist story of this dictator being turned. That's a story. It's not historically valid. So, listen, we can't afford fantasy, right? Do you think you can afford fantasy in your life? I can't afford it in mine. And I don't think we can afford it. But we can engage imagination. And back to your question, it's both and. Let me frame it to you this way. Let's go co-creator here. Yeah, because this is exactly true. Whew. Now, I'm going to use my imagination to present a truth. I'm not saying this is the truth, but it's meant to get you in the arena of truth around co-creation. So let's go. Let's imagine we're up in heaven, wherever you like to imagine. I don't know how you want to image the afterlife or the other dimensions or what you want to call it. I don't care. We're there. Okay. And we're in not only there, all of us, the world, all souls on the planet right now, all of us in this sort of galactic sense of soul contracts are real. We're realizing we're going to be on a timeline on Earth, and there will be a soul contract for someone called Vladimir Putin. We know this. And so we each, in our own personal contracts, which are being scripted and felt into and reviewed, we know that we're going to come to this karmic crossroads on March 25th, 2022, tonight at this live, in our own sense of fate and destiny, and at the overall arching crossroads of a war between an invasion war on Ukraine. And we're going to be asking these questions. Well, is Vladimir Putin part of God? What's the we of this? And Vladimir Putin's soul goes, okay, this is a dark-ass contract. I'm going into a very wounded psyche. But this is what we do to learn lessons on Earth. You know, this is how we get there. And until we get there, there'll always be one of me. So here we go. Now I'm riffing around here to make a point. And Vladimir Putin's soul looks at all of us and goes, okay, how far are you all going to let me get? How far in power? How far in my darkness? This is your co-creative lesson. It's going to take a we to neutralize me and shift the tide. Can you do that? Oh, no, you can't, because you watch Fox News and believe what they say. Yeah, you're out. Oh, you're CNN and you're too caught up in leftist liberal. Oh, you're out. Who's left? Who's left in here that's going to come together in truth, not conspiracy? Come back to the co-creative soul we agreement we made here. And once you're down there and this timeline's active and these events are active, you're going to be living in co-creative questions. What are you all going to do? Because this is a question for the we of humanity. It's not just a question for Ukraine, which Zelensky keeps trying to say to us. That's his contract. I'm the voice of the we. You think Ukraine's the end of this? You're wrong. Study your history. So, what are you going to do, we? And it's a complex question. I don't mean to make light of it at all, but I hope you're getting the sense of the we. When you elect a president that stands in Helsinki and humbles himself before Putin, where do you think that karma goes? I don't care about your political party. Dump it. Your soul isn't Democrat or Republican. Dump it. I ain't interested. You tell me right now where you think that karma goes. It was filmed. We're not debating what's true here. Where do you think that goes? No counterpoints. Answer the question. That's how your angels talk to you. That's how guidance talks to you. That's how co-creative voice talks to you. There are just simply choice and consequence. You're not a bad person. If you voted for someone like Donald Trump, you're not a good person. If you voted for someone like Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, it doesn't matter. What matters is, do you understand the karmic consequences of every vote you cast? Every time you vote, do you actually give a karmic read of the flow chart from the time you empower someone to power and what's next? Most people absolutely do not. And here's our chance to learn. We're taking it, aren't we? I mean, obviously some of us are, and some of us will never. Where does that go? This is where we really are. But yeah, we're going to just say that Vladimir Putin, because he's so dark in this human psyche he's in personality, in fractured ego, is not part of the all? No, he is. This is a journey of learning here. That's the best way I can language it. And we are in a new era of light, of one world consciousness, and becoming actual conscious co-creators that co-create a one world. These are the lessons. Do you want to do them or not? Maybe you put it off like the other person just left. Put it off for another time. That's fine. There's karma for that, though. And it doesn't make you right or wrong. Karma is neutral. It doesn't judge this way. It just Choice, consequence, choice, consequence. I have to say, it's very interesting for me to be so political in a way, because there was a time where I wouldn't have been able to be this political without possibly losing my own platforms. And I always said, we're better to talk about politics. Polis of the people. We the people. We're better than in spirituality. You can admit, hey, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it. I absolutely embrace that. It is uncomfortable. It's not fun. It's depressing. It sucks, But because we don't talk about it in spiritual circles, we do get a Vladimir Putin. Are you not connecting the karmic dots? Do you think transformation happens only in comfort? Or what you want to get away from? That's a rhetorical question, obviously. Of course not. Now, I am a fan of checking out to check in. Sometimes you just gotta be like, look, I'm checking out. I'll be back. But I'm checking out. Absolutely, that's great self-care. But we have soul contracts to be checked in. And I'm sorry, you call yourself a co-creator and you're not checked in. I'm calling bullshit. I just am. Checked in means I'm going to feel the dark stuff. I'm going to look at it. I'm not going to loop in it. I'm not going to sit there and keep looking all day. You know what I do? FYI, if it's helpful for you, I have an hour max a day. I check into being informed on the world. Sometimes just 30 minutes, but I do it. And sometimes I'm like, I need a full day away, but I'll be back Sunday. Okay, I'm conscious about it. That's kind of the challenge. We're so unconscious about what we check into. We get contaminated, not informed. We click on this, click on that, click on this conspiracy, that, and you're getting contaminated. You're not getting informed. You're getting contaminated. Do you even know the difference? This is the questions we're living in. Do we know the difference between contamination and information? It's so blurred in the social media age. What's contaminating? What's informed you? So anyway, this is a great question. And these have been phenomenal questions, everybody. Just wow. This is about understanding with the Putin question, Linda, soul contracts, different realms of how things are assigned, if you will, slotted in. That's a better way to think about it, into this life. And, people, it's just living in this question. When people ask, how did the Holocaust happen? The answer is simply because people let it. It's really actually that simple. Because people let it until they didn't. So how did the war in Ukraine start? Well, because people let it. And I would include it. I would include the world there. And they lacked imagination and they let it. And here we are. And in that question, and in the answer I just offered, is empowerment to shift. If we admit we let this happen, now we have choice to shift. Until we admit, hey, and I'm not saying, I got to be clear. There's very small ways this is true and large ways this is true. But if you can't connect a karmic dot from the president you elected, who had a love affair with Russia, and where we are now, well, I don't think you're seeing clearly. That's my personal, professional, intuitive opinion. I don't care what party you're in. And nor should you. Give it up. The only side we choose now is love and us. Can we all agree on that? Now, that said, I'll let y'all go. I hope this was helpful. I'm sure it was incredibly provocative. I hope so. This is Love Rebel session. I think it turned into a a really big love rebel session. So stay tuned. We'll do another live, I believe, next week. Don't quote me on that. And I'm not sure of the topic. We're going to shift gears a little bit off of here. But I'm just trying to get to my media producer here. It's usually a little closer, but I'm looking at your questions. Once again, share this with whomever you think it would benefit. And might I ask just an honor code? Because I'm sure I pissed a lot of people off tonight, and that's totally fine, or just triggered things. I would ask, let triggering be okay, part one, and let us understand that our growth happens in the discomfort of it, and asking questions, questioning things, questioning ourselves, our perspectives, which I did a lot of tonight by offering different perspectives from my lens of my skill sets and what I've seen and my perspective on where we are in the world. I think the more of that, the better. We don't have to agree at all. You don't have to agree to be in my classroom. You have to agree with me all the time. Actually, that's fine. Now, in disagreement, you do have to be respectful, because that's what we do as spiritually mature adults, right? We respect each other in disagreements. But this cancel culture of, well, I'm unfollowing, or I'm unsubscribing, or I'm checking out, we're not going to grow in that. That's just, come on, you know that's true. We got to be a little uncomfortable. Growth happens oftentimes in the discomfort. So it's little words of wisdom as we close out. I'll see you soon, but get on my newsletter, stay tuned, and once again, share this around with whomever it might help. And I'll look through some of your comments later. And so much love to all of you. Also, we're running a bit late. I would do this otherwise. Pray. If you need to come back to the prayer from last week, absolutely. That's why I did it, for you to kind of come back and get in there. But pray, like candles, help causes. Maybe what I'll do soon, I actually just donated some money to an actual cause in Ukraine that for me felt like I had a contract to do that for it. Whatever you can. Obviously, we all have our limits of resources and time and focus, but it all counts. It truly does. It all counts, because we're a we. All right. I'll see you next time. Namaste.